What if the story you tell yourself about who you are and why your life is the way it is completely wrong? Tony Robbins reveals that you're not living your truth, you're living your story. And when you change the story, everything changes. This will blow your mind. Welcome to Major Inspiration. I'm your host, and today we're diving into one of Tony Robbins' most transformative teachings, the power of story. You have a narrative about your life, why you succeeded, why you failed, what you're capable of, what you're not. Tony shows that this story is fiction, not fact, and rewriting it is the key to transformation. Let's break down how. The stories you tell yourself. Every person has stories about themselves. I'm not good with money because my parents were poor. I can't maintain relationships because of my childhood. I'm not a morning person. I'm just not creative. These sound like explanations, but Tony Robbins reveals they're just stories, interpretations you've chosen about your experiences. Here's what most people don't realize. The story is not what happened. It's your interpretation of what happened. Two people can experience the same event and create completely different stories. One person grows up poor and creates the story, I learned resilience and hunger. Another creates, I'll never have enough. Same facts, different stories, completely different lives. Tony emphasizes that your story determines everything. It shapes what you believe is possible, what actions you take, what you tolerate, and what you pursue. Your story is more powerful than your circumstances. People with tragic stories but empowering interpretations thrive. People with privileged circumstances but disempowering stories struggle. The story is everything. Why your story holds you back. So why do limiting stories persist? Tony identifies several reasons. First, your story gives you certainty. Even if it's disempowering, it's familiar. I know who I am. I'm the person who struggles with X. There's strange comfort in this. Second, your story protects your identity. You've built your sense of self around this narrative. Changing it means you don't know who you are anymore. That's scary. Third, your story gives you excuses. I can't succeed because of my past, my circumstances, my limitations. This removes responsibility. You're not failing. You're just living out an inevitable story. Fourth, your story gets reinforced constantly. You notice evidence that confirms it and ignore evidence that contradicts it. If your story is, people always let me down, you'll remember every betrayal and forget every act of loyalty. The story becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Fifth, changing your story requires acknowledging you've been wrong. If your life hasn't worked because of your story, that means you've wasted years living a fiction. This is painful to admit, but Tony is clear. You can either be right about your limiting story, or you can be free. You can't be both. How to change your story? So how do you actually change your story? Tony offers a clear process. First, identify your limiting stories. What do you tell yourself about why your life is the way it is? Write them down. Get them out of your head where they run unconsciously. Second, question whether the story is true. Is it fact or is it interpretation? Tony uses Byron Katie's question, can you absolutely know that it's true? Usually the answer is no. It's just one possible interpretation among many. Third, find counterexamples. Look for evidence that contradicts your story. If your story is, I always fail, find times you succeeded. Your brain has been filtering reality to match your story. Now deliberately look for contradictions. Fourth, create a new, empowering story with the same facts. You don't change what happened. You change what it means. I struggled financially becomes I learned resourcefulness and determination that prepared me for success. The facts are identical. The meaning is transformed. Fifth, live from the new story immediately. Don't wait to see if it's true. Act as if it's already true. Your brain will find evidence for whatever story you're committed to. Commit to the empowering one and watch your reality shift. Tony emphasizes this isn't positive thinking or delusion. You're not pretending something didn't happen. You're choosing a more useful interpretation of what did happen. The power of a new narrative. What happens when you change your story? Tony describes profound transformations. First, your identity shifts. When you're no longer the person who can't, you become the person who's learning to. This opens entirely new possibilities. Second, your actions change. When your story is limiting, your actions are limited. When your story is empowering, you take actions you never would have before because that's not who I am no longer applies. Third, your relationships transform. The story you tell about your relationships determines how you show up in them. Change the story from people always hurt me to I'm learning to trust wisely and watch your connections deepen. Fourth, your emotional state improves. Limiting stories create negative emotional patterns. Empowering stories generate resourceful states. Same circumstances, completely different experience. Fifth, you reclaim your power. When your story is about what was done to you, you're a victim. When your story is about what you learned and who you're becoming, you're the author. You write your future. Tony emphasizes that successful people aren't luckier or more talented. They just have better stories about what their experiences mean and what they're capable of. They've authored empowering narratives that propel them forward. Here's the truth. Your life is not your circumstances. Your life is the story you tell about your circumstances. Two people with identical situations can have completely different lives based solely on the narrative they've created. Tony Robbins invites you to become the author of your story, not just a character in it. Look at your life right now. What story have you been telling about why things are the way they are? About your past, your capabilities, your future? Now ask yourself, is this story serving me? Is it empowering me to create the life I want? Or is it keeping me stuck? If it's limiting you, change it. Not by denying reality, but by choosing a more useful interpretation. Every fact of your life can support multiple stories. Choose the one that empowers you. Start today. Write down one limiting story you've been living. Then rewrite it. Same facts. Empowering interpretation. Then act from that new story for 1 week. Just 7 days. Live as if this new narrative is true. Watch what happens. You'll discover that the story you thought was reality was just one possible interpretation. And when you choose a better story, you don't just change how you feel about your life. You change your actual life. Because your story determines your actions, and your actions determine your results. This is Tony's gift to you. You're not trapped by your past. You're only trapped by the story you tell about your past. Change the story, change your life. The pen is in your hand. What will you write?